Hello, and welcome to the Mik + 1 podcast, where I sit down with industry leaders to discuss the project-to-product movement. I'm Mik Kirsten, founder and CEO of Tasktop and best-selling author of Project to Product, to survive and thrive in the age of digital disruption with the Flow framework. I'm delighted to have acclaimed digital analyst Brian Solis join me on today's episode. In addition to being a global innovation evangelist at Salesforce, Brian is also a world-renowned keynote speaker and an award-winning author of 8 best-selling books. Brian has been called one of the greatest digital analysts of our time and has studied and influenced the effects of emerging technology on business and society. As a result of his work, Brian also helps leading brands, celebrities, and startups develop new digital transformation, Culture 2.0, and innovation strategies that enable businesses to adapt to new connected markets from the inside out. We covered so much on this episode. Brian's always fascinating to listen to and always gets my creative juices and thoughts going. So let's get right to it. All right. Hello, everyone. I am thrilled to be here with Brian Solis. I think, Brian, you are at this stage my favorite futurist. I've met only a handful over the years, but I think what I keep seeing you put out there in terms of how people should be thinking about their digital transformations, how they need to change their thinking in 2021, how they need to adapt to the novel economy, has just been some amazing and incredibly timely work. So welcome.
Wow! Hey, well, thank you. What a warm welcome. It's a real privilege to be here, Mik. I've enjoyed my work with you. I'm looking forward to more work together. I admire your thinking and all that you've done. So it's an absolute privilege to be here with you.
Thank you so much. And why don't we just dive right in? Something that you wrote recently really caught my eye, that this is 2021, and we should be talking about how people should be thinking and approaching things differently in 2021. You just put out this incredibly powerful message that this is the end of the 2 to 3 year digital transformation project. And that to me resonated so profoundly. So before I jump to my own conclusions of how important that is for our listeners to understand, why don't you tell us a little bit about this and how you came to this conclusion?
Well, the article was part of the idea was part of a 2021 predictions piece that we ran for Salesforce, featured, I think, 21 executives that shared their ideas for the future. And
for the record, this was my favorite one of that whole piece. So.
Thank you. Well, the idea was that COVID changed everything. It shouldn't have taken a global pandemic to accelerate how we think about digital transformation, but it did. And what we saw is, in some cases, 10 years of acceleration and growth in a matter of months. And I think what that should teach us, if we can look at it optimistically, is that we were our own worst enemies. We were our own roadblocks. And when we need to get something done, we can get something done. And the point is that I think one of the things that we weren't thinking about before COVID, which was how can we think about our investments as investments and not as cost centers. And as a result, then what are the outcomes? What are the business level benefits, the metrics that we can tie to these investments so that we can expedite time to value and however you want to measure value, one at the business level, but I also think in many cases we could see things at the operational levels. We could see things at market levels, customer levels, which all has a way of coming back to us. So the essence, the drive of that prediction was to get people in the right frame of mind going into this year and beyond to start thinking about technology as a matter of not just transformation, but as business model modernization, innovation, as ways of accelerating or growing existing revenue streams and creating new revenue streams.
Okay, excellent. Yeah, and I think like we've seen in retail, right? The change is possible. As you said, that's one of the areas where we saw years of change happen in a matter of months. So it is possible. And I think, like you're saying, a lot of the roadblocks are internal. And so I certainly know that in doing the research for Project to Product, one of the main comments I made was that this cost center approach is one of the biggest roadblocks, right? And then these long project plans are one of the biggest roadblocks because transformation is complex. If we don't have a measurable feedback loop, we don't know if the things we're doing are the right things or the wrong things. So you're challenging everyone right now, and I think this challenge is critical. Is that from your transformation efforts, you should be seeing value within months, right? And just take us through how you think about that. Like, we've got a lot of people listening who are either have these projects underway, but things have been those roadblocks have been there. They've been there for years. Maybe they're getting better at some more senior levels of the organizations. Sometimes we're seeing that doesn't translate through the organization. How do you, give the organization a better path, a better purpose to approaching these things in this massive shift? I think from cost center and and centricity on these long activities to customer and relationship centricity and investment?
Well, that one's easy.
In 5 minutes or less. No, we've got time.
I'll be honest with you. I don't know that I have one answer to that. I think it's if anybody knows this, it's you. There's ways to approach this methodically, but also with technology. I think that first step is a mindset step, meaning that you have to think about this work differently. It's almost like personal transformation. It's like this philosophical thing that you have to deal with yourself, which is, what's my role? What's my role in all of this? If you believe that your role is to just follow some roadmap that was created in a time that no longer exists, and that you have to prioritize those investments, watch those costs, prioritize it against other tracks, then you're gone, right? If it's one thing that we've learned post-COVID is that not only can you do these things and move at speed and scale, technology is there to be your friend, but that what your priorities were and the purpose of your business now have completely transformed. So what that means is that all companies will have to move faster. All companies are going to have to be agile. All companies are going to have to be customer centric. And most importantly, all companies are going to have to rethink how they work to get there. The easier answer, I guess, is to realize that the role you play in this is one of innovation, which is creating new value, which is one of substantiating that value to communicate time to value, to communicate the language of the C-suite, which is to say, of all the things we have going on, this is exactly what we're going to get out of this. And more importantly, what we're going to get if we don't do this, which is the other ROI I like to talk about, which is the return on ignorance, which is what's the opportunity cost if we don't do these things. So that's a mindset shift. Software there accelerates anything you want to do.
Okay, excellent. And that's a new unfolding of that acronym for me. That one will stick. What's interesting about your approach, and I think obviously you do talk about some of the key technologies that will shape 2021, right? From ML to RPA and what we're going to continue with bots and the rest. I think there's been so much focus in terms of how to do transformations that's just technology focused, right? I think one of the pitfalls that you mentioned that really resonated with me was so many think of these transformation roadmaps that people are stuck on, as you mentioned. You're just executing to someone's roadmap, and they have to do with moving a legacy system to the cloud or connecting these disparate systems and over-focused on the back office. I think what we all need to do, and what you're saying, is actually start with a customer, start with a relationship, start with what success and what the business model needs, what things look like. Acknowledge the fact that some companies are actually succeeding with this, right? The ones that do take a service and a customer-oriented mentality have actually navigated and proven themselves through COVID that those changes are possible. So I'd like to dig into a couple things, because one thing that you're saying is to do this, you need to move fast, you need to iterate, you need to measure. So how do you look at measuring things from the business perspective? Because I think you said the metrics need to be meaningful to the C-suite, which means they have to do with things like customer success and revenue and conversions and cost and the like. And then I think the big challenge that so many have that I'd like to dig into after is, how do you actually turn that into meaningful measurements for your product innovation, for value stream? But again, that need to be leading indicators for how much value you're delivering to your customers. But if you could start with some guidance on how organizations should think about that ROI at the business level as their business model is shifting.
Well, I'm going to tell you this. I'll tee you up, because I think the best way to end the answer to your question is with your advice, because you're on the front lines and you're seeing where companies are accelerating on these measurements, on these value streams, and communicating that. I'll start with a higher level, which is, I have to come up with all of these new acronyms like CPIs, like customer performance indicators, because I need to force people into these new mindsets, right? Mm-hmm. When we talk about OKRs, or when other companies talk about KPIs, they all measure what the culture of the organization has deemed as value or as valuable. But we're in a new time. Right. I talk about things as before COVID and then after disruption, AD. And we're in this after disruption time. for those who don't know what the novel economy is, I'll quickly explain it because it has to do with the answer. The novel economy was a three-phased approach to how do you respond to COVID. I think phase one was basically everybody, which was I've got to stay alive, I've got to ensure business continuity, I've got to figure out stabilization. We saw a lot of those investments in working from home, a lot of digital commerce strategies. We're seeing now the shift between phase one to phase two, which is staying alive, investments in RPA, automation, some AI, and then phase three is the thrive phase. But the reason why I wanted to bring this up is because we're smack dab in the middle of phase two, right? And phase two is again coming back to that mindset. You're on this trajectory. You're improving things. You realize you can do more. You're reassessing your stacks. You're reassessing your investments. It's now, what do you want on the other side of this? Right? You don't measure things in years anymore. Now we're measuring things in weeks and months. What's that greater future motivating state for the organization? Where are we trying to go? Right? And then how are we going to incrementally get there? And also, one other outcome to add to this metric equation is who's ultimately going to measure that value besides shareholders and our CFO? Customers, I think, are a big part of this, right? Because now they have more choice than ever before. So now we're in this phase two era, and most businesses are doing this because they're learning as they go, which is cool, right? But you have a choice. Break trajectory. Find new ways to accelerate, because now this is the new benchmark. Right? So where you come out of this in phase three is going to determine where you are in the market. And I think the metrics we have to introduce here, one are, the usual time to value, CLV, you name it. But more importantly, the iterative steps that we have to measure to make sure that we're on this trajectory that's going towards this greater future motivating state. I don't think that we have had those meaningful conversations at the C level to just look at this as a startup. I can only relate to this because I've been in Silicon Valley for 20 years, which is when you're a startup, it isn't just about taking your idea to market and growing it. It's about radical, extraordinary growth where you have to make not only a market, but you have to return on that thousands of % for all of those investors along the way. So you start thinking in a way that's not going to, hey, how do I 1x, 10x, whatever it is? It's 1,000x, and the decisions you make to get there require new kinds of metrics, require new kinds of ideas, require new types of skill sets and team collaborations and operations to make those things go. So startups aren't just inventing products, they're inventing operational and business models as they go. So it's a long-winded answer of saying, Mik, I think we have to create new metrics that chart a new course. And those are going to be those that show key milestones, but also those that show us that we're on the right step towards those milestones. Okay, that's great. And I think, I've lived a sort of similar experience with these metrics, right? Where my startup life started with the Steve Blank metrics, the lean canvases, right? But all of those fundamentally were about learning from the market as quickly as you can, validating hypotheses. And in the end, it was all customer and market centric. And OKRs, personally, this is interesting. I've seen more implementation of OKRs in the enterprise in the last 6 months than in the last 6 years. And I personally started using them about a decade ago at Tasktop. I find them invaluable if they're used the right way, because I think you said something key is that they kind of reinforce the culture of the organization. You can't, if you're not customer centric, the OKRs won't be either, right? But at least they, listening to people like yourselves and who actually suggest the customer and relationship centric metrics, OKRs can be a useful vehicle for, I think, capturing those. But I think you're right. So you're saying that we just need, the metrics need to change now. And the metrics do need to be more like those metrics of startups who realized that they needed to 10 or 1,000x the value that they were delivering to customers, rather than these, again, and this is what infuriates me, these roadmaps where the roadmap becomes the metric, right? These are the activities we're going to do to lift and shift our on-prem software to the cloud or integrate these systems. There's no value in that, right? There's no value metric. Now, you're talking a lot about the customer metrics, but you've also been speaking quite a bit about how the importance of staff, because we know with work from anywhere, changing things completely, engagement around staff, purpose around staff. So do you see that as a key thing to track and measure as part of transformations, or tell us a bit more about that? I'm starting to think now about the complete remodeling of the organization or the enterprise in general, right? If you think about one of the things that makes startups so threatening and also so promising is that they have to survive. And so they do what it takes to survive. In many cases, they'll pivot. In many cases, they'll shed talent and acquire new talent. Those shifts, it's funny because a lot of experts will look at those shifts like, oh, well, they're failing or they're not doing something right. No. This is a real-time example of learning and adaptability that all businesses have to just let go of that stigma of failure or change in order to realize that that's how you adapt. You made me think of a Hemingway quote, which is never confuse motion with action. And action, I think if we could just sort of add to Hemingway's quote, tie actions to outcomes and meaningful outcomes for all stakeholders internally and stakeholders externally. One of the reasons my work is inspired by customers is because since the 90s, I have been documenting as a digital anthropologist how customer behaviors were changing as a result of their relationship with digital. And that's important because it changes their mindset, it changes their standards for excellence, it changes their expectations, their preferences, even their values. And what I have seen since March 2020 is a radical acceleration in those shifts as a result of COVID, right? So now you have people who were forced to be digital first in more ways than they were before, right? Now for even the most essential items, they were digital first, but also their values changed because you had this somatic marker that is COVID-19. You had this crazy politics that's still playing out in the United States. You have this fear of getting sick. You see these incredible death tolls all around the world. You see the stress and anxiety of the economy and worry about personal economics and livelihoods. So all of that means that people have accelerated personal transformation and their own individual digital transformation. That means that trajectory we were talking about now has a greater sense of purpose if you want it. McKinsey published in 2020 this startling stat that said, and these numbers exist all around the world, so if you want to read the report, I'll just share the US numbers, which was that 75% of customers had already experimented with a new brand, site, or service, and 60% of those were likely to stick with that new decision post-COVID. So essentially what that stat says is that loyalty is up for grabs, that people are exercising their right to choice, and a lot of that has to do with what's on the other side of a search screen, wherever you search or whatever you're doing on that device. This means that acquisition is up for grabs as well, and retention has never been so important. So anything you want to make in terms of digital transformation, DevOps, however you want to function, has to be to serve this greater purpose quickly, because companies are bleeding customers and new companies are attracting customers. And those who understand who they are, what they value, how they make decisions in real time are going to win. So this is why things like ML, RPA, automation, AI, those types of technologies can help you accelerate in ways you couldn't do previously. But every technology investment needs a sense of purpose. And that purpose is why and what value, what value are our customers seeking? What value can we deliver to them that they're seeking? What value can we deliver them that they didn't know they were seeking, but now they can't live without it now that they have it? All of those things reverse engineer into not only our investments, but how we're going to measure that way forward.
Yeah, I could not agree more. And I've seen more and more examples of this with close colleagues at large companies, like, insurance companies, where they went pre-COVID, they had call queues 100 or 200 deep. And over the summer, those went to 10 or 20,000 deep. And if we take seriously what you're saying, which I think is fundamentally true, is that that customer attention is up for grabs. That customer is not staying on the phone for the next hour and a half to figure out what happened with their trade or whatever they're calling about. It's a trading company, insurance company, or something else of that sort. But so many of these organizations are actually struggling to implement. You can't actually get past that without some bots or agents or RPA or something of that sort, right? The pace of innovation that you need to actually shorten those call queues is much faster than has ever been implemented at these organizations before. So I think that I think this notion that all of this customer attention is up for grabs, and either you capture it this year, or you better to capture it quickly this year, know that you're on the path to it, or it will go elsewhere. Right? Customers will not wait that long, given as you've said, they've now been forced into digital interaction modes. So,
hey, Mik, can I add something there?
Please.
I think it's something that I think as our human condition we get caught up in. Our own biases trip us up. One of the greatest failures in business evolution has been momentum and success. Success is a poor teacher when it comes to innovation. And we've seen that historically with Kodak and the Netflix blockbuster failed acquisition attempt. And, we saw that in strides with initial Walmart acquisitions, of which they're now on a much better path, right? But where we trip ourselves up moving forward is not recognizing that momentum, especially now in these rapidly changing times, is earned. And now with McKinsey's data showing us that customer attention and intention is up for grabs, you can no longer ride on the fact that you have, in most cases, a reluctant relationship with your customer, right? I think I would struggle to come up with a handful of brands where I would say that contacting customer service has just been an incredibly delightful experience. And I think we would all have the same list of companies that would deliver that delightful experience, which means that customer service, for example, in any way that you can improve it, would be a competitive advantage. Yet here we are in 2021, still talking about something that is a 50-year-old problem. So it comes back to that mindset of what are you trying to do? And now the difference is moving forward is that it now has to be a cross-functional collaboration. So this takes agility and speed and time to value and the value stream overall into new directions that we actually haven't really considered before, because the customer, even though we've always said that customer experience is a competitive advantage, I'd like to introduce something new for this year, which is adding an apostrophe S to it, which is the customer's experience. Because when you look at it from their perspective, you will see where you are failing, where you are imposing reluctant relationships upon your customer, and why they are experimenting so actively right now. It's because they can. And once they taste something good, from marketing to sales to service, that's the standard, regardless of industry. And so that's what we have to reverse engineer. The customer wants things. Our own Salesforce research showed that I think it was almost 90% of customers, business customers and consumers, have said that they want businesses to accelerate their digital transformation. I mean, if the customer has to tell you that, it's a big problem. And then more so, a majority of customers, again, business and consumers, are saying they want more digital ways to interact with you. They want those digital experiences to be integrated across that journey, and they want new and innovative ways to do business with you. So essentially, this is a roadmap to say you can't operate in that siloed functional approach. You can't silo data anymore, that you have to work with this new operational model to accelerate the modernization and also this innovation in that customer experience. And in doing so is what's going to help you win, not fixing this, not fixing that, not iteratively or incrementally improving this, and not thinking about this more holistically. So it's a point that I feel like I have to make, because if you don't start thinking this way, you're going to fall way behind. And lastly, this is the same thing you brought up earlier, Mik, which is this is looked at as a cost center. Oh, this is going to be too expensive. This is going to be too hard. This is going to be too trying. We got to just get these little wins here, here, and here. You have to do both. You absolutely have to do both, because you're like that old saying, how do you fix an airplane while it's flying? Well, you should have figured that out a long time ago, because now you have no choice.
Right, exactly. And so what you're saying is just so closely matches the success patterns I've seen for the last half year, right? Which is organizations who define what their product value stream is. A product has a customer, right? However you deliver it, it's as a service, as a physical product, anything of that sort, it's got a well-defined customer, and you've got a metric, and every single person in the organization knows whether they're helping deliver on that metric or not, right? Whether customer engagement is improving, whether time on site is improving, whether repeat visitors or customer net promoter score are improving. Then the other things that we've noticed, these other two, I've personally noticed, and as well as our flow team, these other two key things is that flow is understood and measured, right? So delivering flow time, you mentioned time to value, the way we measure through the flow framework, time to value is through flow time. How quickly can we get value to a customer? And we know that organizations that take 3 months to get value to a customer are not doing so well, and their actual customer metrics have not been doing as well. Organizations that can get time to value their customer within a span of 2 weeks and sometimes within days, well, those organizations did amazingly well, right? Some of them were able to stand up bookings cancellation sites for their if they were travel agencies in days, where there's others struggled for weeks or months, and their call queues blew up even further. And then finally, I think this to me is really important, because the employee, the staff, the people doing the actual work, the creative work to help those customers, the purpose that they have, just reminds me how happy I am that as part of the Flow framework, I made happiness of the staff a core metric of the value stream, right? We've been over COVID at Tasktop. By adopting some of these practices that you're talking about, we've seen our net promoter scores go up, even while people, of course, are dealing with very tricky things in their personal lives and in the political sphere and the rest. So, but somehow connecting these three things, these flow metrics, the customer metrics, and actually focusing in on making employee engagement rise with these three things, I've absolutely seen as a pattern for innovation, for how to quickly see in a matter of days and weeks whether transformation efforts are producing the right thing, or whether you focused in the wrong place, right? Whether the staff that you let go actually that caused a bigger problem because you tried to automate. I'll give you an example. We noticed one of our customers, they let go of 100 manual testers in their efforts for automation, but they did that much too soon. So every single developer who was relying on those testers now had to stop delivering any value to customers and switch to manual testing, because it seemed like a good automation idea, but it was never properly measured. So I think, to put in, if you could give us any other thoughts on this, Brian, how can we again, connect the reality of what our staff are dealing with day to day, with trying to deliver these great experiences and customer experiences and deliver amazing products, with what the organization wants, which is to move faster on these transformations? Because one thing I've seen that's dangerous is when you don't have this kind of flywheel of metrics and customer and employee-centric measure in place, people take shortcuts, and then the shortcuts result in some problematic things, like say what we saw in the Wall Street Journal last week from the ID3, where lots of transformation, but the cars would stop on the Autobahn because the right measures were not put in place.
Boy,
sorry, another quick question for you too.
One of my motivations this year is to really hammer the C-suite and the board, and to help pave the way for everybody, our Salesforce customers, Tasktop customers, who aren't always making decisions at this high level. They're mostly making decisions about the fiefdom that they control. To help them understand, on one side, you are a change agent for the future business right now, and how you operate here actually has to operate throughout the entire company, right? All of the things that you teach about flow and value, these are all instruments of business transformation at every level, in every application. And just because we're structured a certain way right now, no amount of job elimination or new skill hires are going to change the construct of a business if it doesn't change at the top. Mm-hmm. So, for example, if we look at the author of the Lean Startup, Eric, who has also created the LTSE, which I really, really am. In fact, I have to reach out to him to talk to him more about this. The Long-Term Stock Exchange, mm-hmm. which is helping shareholders, helping boards understand that if you're making decisions quarter to quarter, you're never going to break out of this rut. You'll only incremove enough to just survive. You're almost like treading water. But I think this is an opportunity to think differently, kind of coming back to where this conversation started, is what's your longer term outcome? What's your value at every level? And how do customers win with you along the way? How do you essentially fund this transformation through growth, starting with incremental and then cross collaboration growth? And that's totally possible. It just requires a new mindset. And I think a lot of that is, for those who are listening or watching right now, you are the champion of this. I often say, if you're waiting for someone to tell you what to do, you're on the wrong side of innovation. This is an important time for transformation to come from the middle up in order to bring change from the top down. So it's no easy task, right? But I think demonstrating incremental wins, but communicating those wins outside of your own ecosystem to the other organizations within your company to say that this is the path forward. We have to do this together, and our customer is going to win. And here's what that looks like. We need storytellers. We need cheerleaders, and more importantly, we need to realize that our audience is those that are holding us back. And in many cases, that's the C-suite right now. And look, no fault of their own, Mik. They've had this short-termism, as I called it. They have this conditioned view of how they measure success and how their success is measured. And so that we have to push them now to realize that we need new leadership. We can't function by yesterday's business standards. We know how to get there. We have the systems to get there. We just need that greater vision, that greater support.
Yeah, and Brian, I love how you're saying that vision will often come from the middle of an organization. One experience I had recently, actually, the last episode that we recorded with Rene Testrata, he was the character in Project Product. He told his story about how he helped change the way BMW Group does innovation around software, and it was actually through that storytelling he was able to. I think you said such a key thing. I've not heard this as much before, but funding the transformation through growth. If you can learn how to do that, because there's so much value to be untapped when you remove those roadblocks, right? When you focus on value, not on the roadmaps, and being able to tell that story. So I also really like how you're saying this really has to do with personal transformation. I know for me, getting to the flow framework was through the psychological and the personal concepts of flow and what I learned about those. So can you just tell any other, those are just, I think, some great inspirational words for the change agents that really are going to make a difference in 2021. So storytelling, funding the transformation through growth, being able to communicate to the business, as you said, with effective metrics and the right kind of metrics, the right kind of language. Anything else that these change agents who are, I believe, the ones listening to this podcast, anything else you think they should be doing as they think through the year ahead?
In a previous life, I wrote a paper called the Change Agents Manifesto. And if you look on SlideShare, I think it's under my account, which is just Brian Solis. It's there for a free download. And it's essentially that. It's a manifesto to drive change from the middle. And explains the challenges that you'll face, but also how you navigate the human condition, if you will, politics, egos, all the things that get in the way, mindsets, bias, etc. So that's the sort of your homework. But the other thing is to realize that if change isn't going to be because of you, then it's going to happen to you. And that means it's not always going to be the best desired change. We need leaders more than ever today. This isn't just some inspirational sort of rah-rah cheerleading for you. It's to say that, as Mik, I'm sure you can attest, that all changes happen because people believe that it needs to happen and they go fight for it. And if you're going to fight for it in the name of the customer, and that customer is going to deliver those returns in ways that stave off disruption and also drive growth, then what greater purpose is there, right? And the last thing that I'll leave you with is that your efforts are actually helping the organization not only survive, but your teams understand new ways of thinking and working and embracing new technologies that make them more valuable as individuals and also as teams. And that is something you don't lose. That goes with you wherever you go and whatever you do. So this is an investment in yourself as well.
Yeah, that I could not agree more. And that is I think just an amazing way to wrap it up, Brian. So this investment in change and making sure you're managing the change, not it managing you. Exactly. The people who I see do it, they do it again and again within the organization, sometimes between organizations, sometimes they come back to that same organization. But of course, the entire business, the entire organization is always better for it. So here's to those change agents. We'll link the Change Agent Manifesto and some of your other key work and the materials at the end of the podcast. So Brian, thank you so much. No more 2 to 3 year transformation projects. Remember, you need value in weeks, not months. Any other last words?
No. Just keep listening to Mik. He's gonna guide you.
Excellent. Thanks so much. That was so amazing, Brian. And look forward to our next chat. Huge thank you to Brian for joining me on this episode. For more, follow me in my journey on LinkedIn, Twitter, or using the hashtags Mik+1 or Project to Product. You can reach out to Brian on LinkedIn or on his Twitter at Brian Solis, as well as his website, briansolis.com. I have a new episode every 2 weeks, so hit subscribe to join us again. You can also search for Project the Product to get the book. And remember, all author proceeds go to supporting women and minorities in technology. Thanks, stay safe, and until next time.